Okay, we're back for the second half of the Back to the Future Trilogy Retro Review. A lot happened in between the 5 years between Back to the Future 1 and 2. Michael J. Fox ended his run on Family Ties. The movie itself was a massive hit. It had already been into the vernacular of American culture. Ronald Reagan used it in one of his State of the Union address when it comes to where we're going, we don't need roads. Yeah. So it was there, and Ronald Reagan absolutely loved the movie and everything, especially when it referenced him. He just loved the movie because being a former actor himself, and you know he appreciated good work. Okay, well, Back to the Future itself, the soundtrack, as you can see here, had a lot of good music on it and everything. It had 2 songs by Huey Lewis and the News, Power of Love and Back in Time, which Back in Time basically is the main theme for the whole series. It had also gentlemen's Eric Clapton, also had Lindsey Buckingham from Fleetwood Mac, and also Alan Silvestri. This is the first Alan Silvestri who went on to do a lot of Robert Zemeckis' scores of all his films, who is one of the best. He also did the theme song for the Avengers movie. He did the Back to the Future theme, which is one of the coolest theme songs out there. You know, that dun 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 dun. I mean, I absolutely just love that song. I played it constantly when I got the soundtrack on cassette tape. Kind of
just when you were entering and leaving a room, you know.
Yeah. But it was Huey Lewis
catchphrase, turn around every once in a while, just hope I get back in time.
Yeah. But Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis got nominated for Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. Unfortunately, they didn't win that year. And Huey Lewis and the News' Power of Love got nominated for Best Song at the Oscars that year as well. So the movie was doing great. It was, as I said, the highest-grossing film in 1985. So obviously, there was going to be a sequel.
Well, there had to be at that point.
And
just for money's sake.
So they were approached to do the sequel, Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis, and everybody else was pretty much on board. You know, except for Crispin Glover, who decided not to come back because him and the producers couldn't agree on terms. So what happened was they decided to go ahead and do the film without him. So it was a lengthy process to get Back to the Future Part 2 going. What happened was during that time, while Bob Gale went to go write Back to the Future Part 2, Roger Rabbit was going to be made by Robert Zemeckis and Steven Spielberg. So Bob Gale wrote it himself. He decided, well, they did a draft where they were going to go to the 60s, you know, and of course, you know, Marty would accidentally mess up his the conception of his birth, and basically it was almost a recycled plot line. So
it pretty much seemed that way. I like the way they went when they went to Back to the Future too.
Yeah. It was a very unusual sequel. Back to the Future Part 2 is a very unusual sequel, and we'll get into that. So basically what happened was that everybody came back, with the exception of Crispin Glover. The movie picks up directly where it left off, at the end of Back to the Future Part 1. The exact, you know, where Doc comes back from the future and tells Marty and Jen that they have to come back. This time Jennifer's played by Elizabeth Shue. Clara Wells, for some reason, didn't come back, was unable to return for the second one. And then what happened was, during the time, in a different perspective and point of view and everything, they see this point of view of the DeLorean. He comes out of the house to show Marty some matchbooks that he had printed up for his auto detailing, and he sees the DeLorean lift off and fly away and go into the future. And he's like, well, what the hell's going on here? So he's left with questions. So you got a cliffhanger at the beginning of this movie.
Yeah.
And after the credits roll, the DeLorean shoots into the middle of air traffic. Marty's asking, well, where the hell are we? When are we? And he's like, we're going to Hill Valley Wednesday, October 21st, 2015, which is today. So it has been like, you know, a mind-blowing experience that we're here at Back to the Future Day, you know, and so it's been absolutely, you know, the day that I've been waiting for over 20 years and everything to see this day. I'm surprised I've lived long enough to see this day. A lot of people are probably surprised that I've lived long enough to see this day. So what happened was in Back to the Future Part 2, they land in Hill Valley.
Yeah.
They land in the middle of an alley, and during that time and everything, Marty's girlfriend Jennifer is like all surprised and everything, like they were talking about. We can actually see our future, and Doc is, you know, like, oh my God. So he gets this little thing and he knocks her out. Well, always the problem with the writers is that they hated the fact that the girl was in the car the whole time. So this was their way of getting her out of the way so Doc and Marty can do what needs to be done. So,
of course, it's not the last time you see her in the films. So,
yeah.
I mean.
So what happens is that they land in the middle of an alley. Marty's kind of wondering kind of looking around and everything. Doesn't see anything yet. And then Doc starts peeling off his face.
Yeah.
And to show that, you know, he went to what they call a rejuvenation clinic and, you know, basically got an added 40 years or 80 years to his life or something like that. So Marty's like, well, what's going on? So he's like, look what happens to your son. He shows him a newspaper of USA Today, and it's Marty's son. He looks just like him. That he got into some robbery.
Yeah.
That was, he was supposed to be talked into by Biff's grandson, Griff. So what goes on is that Doc, you know, gets him to dress in these clothes that looks almost like Marty. And there's this jacket that's a self-fitting jacket. And these power laces, which Nike is actually still trying to get the technology going. As a matter of fact, in 2011, Michael J. Fox's Foundation and Nike cooperated and did a limited edition Nike laces shoes, which they didn't lace up, but they lit up and everything, and they're basically used for display. So, so Marty's ready to go take his son's place. Doc, you know, off camera, knocks Marty's son out with the same sleeping inducer, whatever you want to call it. And what happens is that Marty goes out and wanders into the Hill Valley 2015, which I think is one of the best representations of the future at that time. Which it was
iconic the way they did it. The whole setup of the set. I mean, take away the flying cars and stuff like that, it's still rather interesting to look at. You know, I thought the sets were just really well done, very well put together.
Yeah, and if you look at some of the town shoppies, off-skirt mall little shops, plazas, they kind of resemble them in some way and everything, the designs and everything.
Even almost the setup of the kind of the circular town square kind of deal.
Yeah, I mean, if you look in Gremlins, the Back to the Future town, Hill Valley, is the same town backlot, the Universal backlot that they used in Gremlins. So if you look at the theater that blew up that had all the Gremlins, look at the theater and everything that's in Back to the Future Part 2 or Part 1, and you'll see the resemblances. But again, when it comes to Back to the Future was meant to be all a joke.
Yeah.
You know, the Cubs winning the World Series, which, you know, I think the Cubs
that was just harsh.
Yeah.
You know?
But I think the Cubs actually made the playoffs this year too.
If I'm not mistaken, I think so.
And Miami has a team in the movie, which is actually the Florida Marlins, which they turned around and changed themselves to the Miami Marlins.
Yep.
So it's close to prediction. If you look in the newspaper, it says Queen Diana was to visit the States, which unfortunately did not happen.
Okay.
Lady Di passed away back in the late 90s. And then they had the thing called Slam Ball. If you look closely in the newspaper, which they did eventually have as a game called Slam Ball, which they're jumping on trampolines. But what happened was Marty's looking around and he sees, you know, Mayor Goldie Wilson III talking about hover conversions, and then all of a sudden you hear dun 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 dun, and something pops out of this holodecks theater and everything, and it's Jaws 19, which at the time a lot of people thought there were going to be a lot of truth because of Jaws 4.
They did make it up to 4, you know.
Yeah.
But as we talked about, 3 and 4 were
very horrible.
I don't think I can relate.
Hey, if you look on YouTube, there'll be they got a Jaws 19 trailer out there.
Yeah.
Which is very funny, so you should check it out.
But we actually have a screenshot from the movie,
and it's directed by Max Spielberg, which is actually Steven Spielberg's son, and it's a Holomax theater, and it's something. If you can look like this time, it's really personal.
Yeah. Which overall, that whole scene I thought was just very interesting, very comical.
Yeah.
The fact that the Jaws hologram actually jumps out and bites at Marty.
Yeah.
The whole thing explodes and disappears. You know? But
and they
the
played
fact
that to death on the scenes when they showed clips and everything, like the upcoming sequel to Back to the Future Part 2. This scene got played a lot, and then the laughter got died away real quick before the movie came out. So I can remember nobody really giggling a little bit, but not laughing because they had seen it over and over again.
Well, it was more funny than anything just to see, Marty McFly dodging, over a hologram, just the overreaction to it.
And then all of a sudden, he looks at this little place called Blast from the Past and everything, a little antique store, and you see a lot of references to previous films, like a Jaws video game from the Nintendo, a Roger Rabbit, which was Zemeckis' previous film, and a bunch of things, and you see the sports almanac that's sitting there in the window. So Marty sees the Cafe 80s, which was originally Lou's Cafe, and in the 80s it was an aerobics class, and now in 2015 it's Cafe 80s and everything was a retro style place. And then he walks in and there's these Max Headrooms. If you don't know who Max Headroom is and everything, it's a character that was actually an advertising character for Coca-Cola, and he ended up getting his own show, but that's a whole other thing. But they kind of resemble icons of the 80s, like Michael Jackson, the Ayatollah,
it's much like stopping into someplace like Planet Hollywood, or even Steak and Shake. It's a step back into the past. You know, Steak and Shake, the way they dress up like they did in the 50s, diners kind of deal.
But there's this one scene where the Max Headroom type of characters that are representing the icons of the 80s. Reagan comes up, you want some mesquite ribs or something, and then the Ayatollah Khomeini comes up and everything, which was the one of the leading villains of the Iranian that culture over in the Middle East and everything. And he's like, you want the hot Cajun chili special, Cajun style, and then they start arguing and everything, and then Michael J. Fox just pops up and says, hey, all I want is a Pepsi, which is normal because Michael J. Fox was the spokesman for Pepsi at the time. That's why you see a lot of Pepsi products in the first two films.
Which actually today they were supposed to be running and producing Pepsi Perfect.
Yeah, and the Pepsi Perfect and the special bottles that were...
Which we actually got a...
Yeah. As you can see,
bottle here.
So, that was,
That was a big look
20-some odd years.
Into the future. I mean, as we all know, it's easier to find canned Pepsi than it is to find any bottles. Bottles were real big back in the older days before they started canning. But just to see this come to fruition is actually pretty interesting.
Exactly. And also when he gets in there and everything, he actually, goes and he sees this old video game called Wild Gunman.
Yeah.
And the thing is, Wild Gunman was never an arcade version. It was always a Nintendo system game. But if you notice, one of the little kids that Marty's talking to is actually Elijah Wood. It's his first movie when he's very small. And they're like, you gotta use your hands? That's like a baby's toy. And it also sets up part 3 with Marty doing the Wild Gunman draw thing. So, but... what happened was Marty's like, whatever, kids, and then he turns around and his son is not knocked out all the way, and he walks and he runs and hides and everything. So he's sitting there listening to his son, and then Griff and his gang show up and everything, and they're like bullying him and everything, and Marty's like, oh my god, he's a complete wimp. So they pick him up when he says, I don't think I should do this, and they pick up Marty Jr., throw him across the table. And then Marty's like, sit down and shut up, takes his hat and everything. And the technology in this and everything, when it comes to called the VistaGlide camera, which is what they used for the split screens and everything to put Michael J. Fox in multiple scenes, was absolutely ahead of its time at the time. It was the first time it was used.
It was cutting edge.
It was a computer running a camera and everything and keeping it in that area so they can do the split screens whenever they need to. But to get on, basically what happens is that Marty takes his son's place and tells Griff no. And then Marty is like about to walk away and Griff's like, what are you, chicken?
Yeah, and which shows like the first real glimpse of, weakness in Marty. The fact that he can't back down from a challenge. I mean, any guy knows it's hard to back down from a dare.
Yeah.
But this literally becomes a problem for him. Throughout his whole life, as you come to find out in the movie.
Oh yeah, and then all of a sudden, he confronts Griff, and then he's like, "Nobody calls me Chick." And Griff pulls up, a bat, and once it swings, he missed.
A collapsible bat, by the way, which I'm surprised we don't have those.
Yeah, it was like a King Griffey third special or something like
that. Yeah.
And he wants to swing, he misses, and he gets electrocuted a little bit, and then Marty's about ready to go, "Hey, look!" And he wants to, take a shot, and then Griff catches it, and he kicks him in the groin and pushes him.
Come to find out that there's cybernetic implants, which was a hallmark of a lot of future movies.
Which is almost kind of come to fruition in a way.
Yeah.
But then Marty, runs out, and it's almost the same scene from Back to the Future Part 2.
It was very reminiscent of the original Back to the Future.
The running scene, the chase.
Yeah, the running skateboard scene.
Yeah, and then what Marty does is that he takes these little girl off her board, and it becomes a reveal. I need to use your hoverboard. And basically, the hoverboard, which has started a lot of bullcrap back then and everything, because Robert Zemeckis jokingly said in the interview that the parents group wouldn't let Mattel use them or make them and everything. And Mattel got a lot of mail and a lot of phone calls like, when are these hoverboards coming out? And Mattel got really mad about it. And to this day, a couple years ago, they had a video where
they had a trailer.
They had where the actual hoverboards are coming out, and then come to find out that it was fake. But anyway, Marty gets chased around, just like he did in the first one, and then he gets stuck above water and everything, where he can't move the hoverboard. So Griff and him get onto this giant thing called the Pitbull hoverboard, and he gets.
I think we actually have a picture of a hoverboard.
Yep.
You actually get to see the hoverboard in the original Back to the Future. It's actually, I believe, what he rides to school, isn't it?
No, just regular skateboard in the original one.
It was the second one that he did it in. Yeah. But this is the Mattel model here.
And he actually made a toy version of this and everything and sold it a couple years ago. Of course it doesn't fly, but but I've seen a lot of people make their own too and everything, and it's very crafty looking too. But so Marty is about to get, you see Marty is about to get hit by Griff and everything. He jumps in the water, and Griff and them crashes into the courthouse mall, and what happens was, they get in trouble and everything, and Marty Jr.'s safe,
It stops the whole robbery.
Yeah.
The fact that the Griff and his gang couldn't pull off the robbery and use Marty's son as a scapegoat. Changed the whole thing.
So, so Marty's like, hey, Doc's like, what happened here? He's like, oh, my kid's son showed up and all hell broke loose. And then they took a look at the paper and everything, and everything changed. Yeah. So when they were ready to go back to the future and back to the past, Marty picks up, this bag that he bought, the sports almanac that he saw at the little antique store. And Doc's like, what is this? This is not good material to be reading and everything, And, Marty's like, well, why can't we just place a few bets?
The whole personal game,
Yeah, and then Doc's like, I didn't make the time travel machine for that. So what he does, he tries to throw it in this little container, and then he sees that Jen is been taken off to by the cops and everything. Yep. Because she was found in the alley asleep. So he says, okay, we got to go find her. So what we're going to do is we're going to throw this away, and they throw away into this little dumpster. And when they walk away to get back to the DeLorean, old Biff emerges when he realizes that everything seems familiar when he saw the DeLorean. And he says, so Doc Brown invented a time machine. So when they go to Marty and Jen, or Marty's future home, to pick her up, apparently old Biff has followed them. And then, they get there, so you get to see future Marty and his family and everything.
Which I found that part odd, in the beginning of Back to the Future Part 2, Doc Brown tells him that everything with him's fine.
Yeah.
But you see, it's very reminiscent of the original Back to the Future, with the fact that the parents are kind of not who they, not the best version of themselves, I guess you could say. Jennifer is kind of just run down, kind of, like I said, reminiscent of Marty's mother in the first one. And of course, you find out Marty McFly's, rock and roll career was ended by a accident
Yeah.
he had while racing the new truck he got at the end of Back to the Future Part 1.
Yeah. So basically, he got into an automobile accident, which they didn't really hint.
Yeah, crushed his hand.
Yeah, crushed his hand. And then he was talking to when the character Needles, who was played by Flea, who's the basis for Red Hot Chili Peppers. He's like they're doing some illegal scam or something and everything, and his boss catches wind and everything, and they're talking on this big TV screen, which is kind of
Basically Skype.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and he's fired and everything.
Yeah.
So and then Marty's mom and his dad are there, which his dad is being played is in old makeup, being played by some other gentleman named Jeffrey Wiseman. And so Marty, you find out Marty's daughter. He's dressed. Michael J. Fox actually dresses up as his daughter.
Yeah.
And then and she's named Marlene.
Yeah.
So Jen is waking up. She finds herself in this place, so she's witnessing all this. And then she has this paper that says you're fired, and Doc Brown shows up and tells her what's going on, and said place your thumb to the plate.
Yeah.
And then she's about to sneak out of the house and everything, and you find that her older self is coming in to the house as she's exiting, and they both look at each other and scream, and they both pass out.
Yeah.
So Doc catches her, yells for Marty, and they drag her back. Now during this time, Marty got distracted by something, and old Biff steals the DeLorean. And how he figure out how to work the DeLorean is kind of beyond me.
Ingenuity.
Yeah. So when they come
smarter with age.
Yeah. So when they come back and everything, the DeLorean's already back. They show old Biff coming back, and he seems to be a little weary and a little weak and everything. So when they get back to the DeLorean and start loading it up and everything, and Doc Brown's talking about, I wish I'm going to have to destroy the time machine. I'll never be able to see my favorite era, the Old West. So, which is foreshadowing the third one. Yeah. You see Biff, he's like hurting and everything. He's like clutching his chest and everything. And for some reason, he's changed the future. And, he's passing out and he's climbing, falling down behind a car. So somehow the future, he's not going to do well. So he has changed it.
Well, I think it's the simple paradox that he went back, changed the future. He's that future version that was already there.
Yeah.
So that version of him doesn't exist.
Yeah, and he's what some people believe, because in a deleted scene they show him disappearing.
Yeah.
So somewhere in between the 90s and everything, he is erased from existence.
Yeah.
Whether he's killed in a car crash or shot or something.
Well, I more or less just figured that the fact that you didn't see the city changing yet, I figured that was him, that version of him just dying.
Yeah.
Before the whole, because you get the whole future rewritten as you come to find out.
So they go back to 1985, Doc and Marty, and they don't notice anything's changed. So they drop Jennifer off at her house on her porch. And then they decide to come back, get dropped off at Marty's house. Marty sneaks into his house, and somebody's in his room. A young lady and everything is in his room, and he's scared her and everything. And her father jumps in, starts swinging a baseball bat.
Yeah.
Marty runs off and trying to figure out what's going on. He finds out that Hill Valley is turned into a demilitarized zone.
Yeah.
And he's trying to figure out what year it is, and he looks at the paper, and it's Strickland's house. Strickland's pointing a gun. He said, "It's me from school, Marty McFly from school." He's like, "The school burned down 6 years ago."
Yeah.
So much has changed and everything. And then once Marty runs away from Strickland's home after being attacked, he goes to downtown Hill Valley, and it's a demilitarized zone. There's bikers. It's toxic waste being poured around. The courthouse has been turned into
It's complete anarchy.
Yeah, and then the courthouse has been turned into a casino hotel.
Yep.
And it's he looking around, and he bumps into the bum Red.
Yeah.
And he's just looking around, and then he notices the Biff Cannon Museum.
Yeah.
And he basically is given a history lesson of everything that is going on. That Biff is winning at gambling. He's become the luckiest man on earth, and then he finds out that Biff gets married for the third time.
Yeah.
And who it is? It's his mother that Biff is married.
Oh yeah.
And then Marty's screaming and everything.
His high school sweetheart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he gets knocked out by Biff's gang from the first movie.
Yep.
And he wakes up just
That's
like
the
in
only
the
appealing thing of Biff, the fact that when he rose to success, he took his friends with him, you know.
But what happened was is that he woke up just like in Back to the Future Part 1.
Yep.
You know, they kind of redo the whole situation and everything. He wakes up and, you know, his mom's there at the side.
Yep.
And this time she's completely different. She has these breast implants that are
basically turned into the quintessential trophy wife. You know? Yeah.
And then he finds out that, you know, what's going on. He's trying to ask what's going on and everything, and she's like, "Oh my God, it's your father." And he's like, "My father?" Yeah. And then Biff tramples in and everything. He's like, "You're supposed to be in Switzerland." And come to find out and everything, you know, Marty's and his family's pretty much been broken up because of Biff. That is, you know, everybody is completely gone crazy and everything, and are in jail or are in debt and everything, and they're completely living off Biff. So what happens is that, you know, when Biff leaves and everything, he's asking his mom, "What happened to my dad, George McFly? He's been for the last 15 years, you know, he's dead." Marty finds out that his dad's a tombstone, and so Doc shows up at the grave site and everything, and it basically, you know, takes him back to the lab, and he shows him basically this is probably what's happened, and he pulls out the bag and the receipt from where the almanac came from, and he Biff's the top of Biff's cane, which is a fist. So so they now know that older Biff had gone back into time, sometime in the time, and gave his younger self the sports almanac.
Yeah. Which I think they actually, Doc Brown uses a magnifying glass after finding a picture.
Yeah.
And when they look in Biff's pocket with the magnifying glass, they actually discover the sports almanac.
Okay, so they find out that the young Biff has a sports almanac, and so Marty goes and asks that middle-aged Biff, you know, where he found it, you know, and he basically tells him and everything, like, "I know you have this almanac."
Yeah.
So, and then Biff, you know, realizes, you know, because he was warned by older Biff to watch out for a crazy wild-eyed scientist and a kid asking about that book. So Marty is being chased by Biff with a gunfire, and Marty gets chased all the way up to the roof of the courthouse.
Yeah, the new Biff Tannen Casino.
Yeah. So what happens was that he is standing on a ledge, and then Biff's like, "Go ahead, jump. Suicide would be nice and neat." "What if I don't?" You know, said lead poison, pointing the gun at him. And he's like, and then he tells, you know, they'll match up the bullets that came out of that gun. He's like, "Kid, I own the police." Yep. Besides, they didn't find the bullets that killed your old man, basically admitting that Biff was the one that killed his dad. But what happened was that Marty looks down and then he just jumps.
Yeah.
Biff's like, "Okay," and then he comes to find out Marty's on the DeLorean, and Doc knocks the door open and hits Biff, knocks him out. Marty says, "We got to go back to 1955." So basically what Doc and Marty do is that they go back to the year 1955. And November 5th, 1955, which is the same date that the lightning bolt in the clock tower, the climax of the first film. So they're basically in the original film.
Pretty much.
In a different angle.
They're in the same setting.
Yeah. And that's what makes Back to the Future Part 2 a unique sequel. It's the only sequel that really goes back into its predecessor and everything.
It literally puts it back into the predecessor.
And it's
which I always found it odd that was the day that Biff picked to go back to,
Yeah.
Out of all the days he could have picked, it turns out the sports almanac was what made him all his money. I mean, you figure he could have come back, even 2 years before that.
Yeah.
Made just that little bit more money, done it a little bit more quick.
Yeah, but I think he also knows that's the night.
Yeah.
George punched him out.
Revenge sake, the date just stuck in his mind.
Yeah. So, so they go back into 1955, and it's what you said, a third person type of view. Marty is now a third person viewing this. So he's following Biff around, trying to get the almanac in any way, shape, or form. So he gets stuck in the garage during that time when he notices, Biff and old Biff talking and everything, which is another wonderful shot and everything from that VistaGlide camera and everything. When you...
It also gives you a chance to look at how good the makeup was for that scene. You get to see, old Biff standing there next to young Biff. It really just, it shows you how far they had gone to make him look like the same person.
Yeah. So what happens is that, Marty hears everything that the old Biff tells young Biff what to do and the warnings about him and Doc, and Marty gets locked into the garage, and then he finds out that oh my God, that's right, Biff's going to go to the enchantment under the sea dance and everything. Yep. So that's my chance to try to get the almanac and everything, and then so he follows him in the back seat of his car and everything. And they go to the enchantment of the sea dance, and so basically Marty's seeing everything in a different angle, seeing things that wasn't seen before, little tidbits that were in between each scene that
I think it's little tidbits that really helped you realize that he was the third person.
Yeah.
Just the fact that he wasn't just following himself or just following Biff.
Yeah.
The fact that there was more to his perspective at the time, being back in time when he was already back in time.
Yeah, there's a scene where he sees Biff looking at a magazine and he's got binoculars and he sees himself and his mom driving into the parking lot. So there's so many little antics and everything when Marty's trying to get to this, getting close to it and everything, almost getting close to it, and then all of a sudden there's this one scene where it's in a different angle of George knocking out Biff. So Marty races and everything because he didn't really get to see his dad knock Biff out. So he finally gets to see it, but in a different angle, and he's seeing himself off into the distance and everything in a different angle. And then finally, he's saying, well, everybody clear back and everything. After everybody has left and everything, he goes and says, I know CPR and everything. Yeah. And Biff's like coming to and everything. He's like, you! And Marty knocks him out and takes the almanac out of his pocket and runs away.
One of the most annoying guys in the whole film was this one guy standing there going, I think he took his wallet. Did you see that? I think he took his wallet.
Yeah, that was rather unnecessary.
Yeah.
But, so Marty's running around and he bumps into Biff's guys, and they're like, wait a minute, we just put you in a trunk and everything. So he's like, hey guys, look at that. So he's being chased into the auditorium. So, and then at the time, when they walk into the auditorium after him, they see him up on stage playing Johnny Be Good. So they're like, okay, we're going to go wait for him when he gets off stage. So now he has to get up on the scaffold and everything while he's playing Johnny Be Good. So he can prevent Biff's guys from attacking him once he walks off stage and causing a paradox.
Yeah.
So
it was much to the fact that he had to keep the original, altered timeline intact by, fixing whatever mistakes he made by being seen in the new altered timeline.
Yeah. So what he does while he climbs under these sandbags, he takes them and he drops them onto Biff's guys, knocking them unconscious, and then he goes off and goes outside and everything, and then he's looking out the door and he's basically seeing his parents talking to him, what you saw at the end of the dance and everything, saying Marty, well, what a nice name. So when Michael J. Fox's character runs out the door from that first part, he slams the door open, and what he didn't know is that Biff and Marty are talking face to face. It's like, you and me out in the parking lot right now. And then he calls him chicken, and he walks up to the door, slowly up to Biff. Like, nobody calls me. And then Marty, from the part one,
Marty,
part one, Marty opens the door, slamming it, knocking Marty of part two. This is really confusing, I know, knocking him out. So, and then
it's one of those things that verbalizing it isn't as easy as seeing it.
Yeah. And then Marty, gets the almanac stolen back from Biff. So Biff drives off, and then he climbs up on top of the gymnasium, tells Doc what's going on. So they get to DeLorean and chase after him and everything. And Marty gets on the hoverboard, glides over there to it, and then tries to get the almanac again. They start.
It's a rather interesting chase scene.
Yeah.
Overall, just the DeLorean, the hoverboard, the fact that they're, chasing after Biff.
Yeah.
I mean, overall, just a really good chase scene.
Yeah, and then, they get into this tunnel where Marty's, basically he's got the almanac in his hands and he's in the middle of the tunnel and he turns around and he realizes, I got a long way to go. So he's, going as fast as he can and everything. And again, the techniques that in the long-term trick photographies and everything they did to make the hoverboards look real was, again, very outstanding. And then so when Marty thinks that he's about to be a goner and everything, and Biff's about to drive right up to him, he sees these little a rope with flags on them drop down, and it's Doc, so Marty can catch her, and the DeLorean flies off with Marty. And again, Biff's like, what the hell is going on? Looking up in the air, and then not paying attention because he sees this car flying in the air. And again, what happens? He crashes into the manure truck. So, and then, when he gets himself uncovered and everything, he spits out manure, and he's like, manure! I hate manure! So, what they do is they get back to Lionel Estates, which would be eventually Marty's future home. Marty finds a can, and this was the quickest burning of a book I've ever seen with a little bitty match.
Yeah.
And lights it up, and the almanac catches on fire. And then Marty looks at the matchbooks, and
Feature paper.
Yeah. And Marty looks at the matchbook that says Biff's Pleasure Palace, and it starts changing to Biff's Auto Detailing. And then he looks at the newspaper that he's been carrying with him that said George McFly murdered. It turns around, changes to George McFly honored.
Yeah.
And then Doc has this one paper that says local crackpot scientist committed, and then it turns around saying local scientist, honored. So their future has been restored back to its original timeline. So, and then Marty's like, everything fine then. He's like, yep, it's a ripple effect. The future is back. Let's go home. And then Marty's like, okay, let's get back to the future. And then before he says that, a lightning bolt strikes. And he's like, Doc, you okay? He says, yeah, pretty much almost bought the farm. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, the DeLorean gets struck by lightning. You see this explosion and it disappears.
Yeah.
You're thinking, oh my God, what the hell's just happened? The DeLorean just exploded. And I'm like, when I'm seeing this for the first time, I'm thinking, well, what the hell was this about?
It was quite the interesting scene. I mean, it was exciting, it was confusing, it was dramatic, it was everything you look for in a good climax, you know?
And then Marty notices that the little ribbons of rope with the ribbons on it and everything falls to the ground. He's like, oh my God, Doc's gone. And then it starts raining. And then you see these headlights off in the distance. And then, the car comes up, pulls up and stops. So, and what happens?
Man gets out from the U.S. Postal Service.
That was UPS.
UPS, that's right. Well, UPS.
No, Western Union. That was Western Union, that's right.
But anyway, they've been holding a package for, what was it, 100 years?
No, 70 years.
70 years. And it just happened to be a letter from Doc Brown from the year 1885.
Yeah, because if you look carefully and everything, the circuits were messing up. And then Doc's like, damn, I got to fix that. And you see, September 1885 on the circuits briefly. So what happens is that Marty reads the letter and he's like, it's from the Doc. And he's reading, I've been happily living in the past 6 months in the year 1885. He goes, 1885, September 1885. And he runs off and the guy's like, you need any help? And Marty's like, there's only one man that can help me. So they go back to Town Square where Marty is basically going to relive the whole climax of Back to the Future. You see the lightning at the clock tower, it blows up. Marty from that era goes back to the future, and then Doc starts running, in between the fire lines and everything, the fire trails. And then you turn back, he's just all happy, and all of a sudden you see Marty popping up from the back of a car.
Yeah.
And he's running up to Doc, and he's like, Doc. And he's like, oh, what's going on? And he's like, no, it's impossible. I just sent you back to the future. And Marty's like, I know you sent me back to the future, but I'm back. I'm back from the future.
Yeah.
And Doc kind of glazes up and he goes, great Scott, and passes out right in front of Marty. So Marty's like trying to wake Doc up and everything, and he's like, oh, great. And then all of a sudden you see this, the sign come up, to be concluded. Yeah. And you're like, okay, well, we knew there's going to be a third. I knew there's going to be a third one. and you're like, oh, they're gonna end it off in a cliffhanger, and then when it goes
For
to
me,
black,
it was where they ended it. I mean, it had everything you wanted to know, but it was at that point. They ended it at that perfect point where you just wanted more.
Yeah,
you couldn't wait for it.
and then you're thinking, okay, you're gonna wait a while for another Back to the Future. What happens? They give you the trailer, a teaser trailer to Back to the Future Part 3, and it was going to be out within 6 months. Because that was their way of saying, we've been filming these things together. And not only is it coming soon, it's done, almost done and everything, and you're going to get it in 6 months instead of another 5 years and everything. So that's what, that was exciting. They said summer of 1990. And, I have to say, Back to the Future Part 2 was a bit of a letdown for a lot of fans.
I think it was
because you weren't in the future that long.
Yeah, I think it was just the whole, Biff era, if you will. It was really dark. It was completely different from the previous film.
Yeah.
It had a darker tone. I mean, it was just overall, more heavy on more about Biff, less about Marty.
Yeah. Well, see, the thing is, it's what it was never about Marty. His trilogy was never about Marty.
Well,
Marty.
It's the fact that you grow attached to that character. You watch the original film, you see what he goes through, you root for that character. You root for Doc Brown.
It's like
so when you see, Biff and them, it's kind of it's a letdown.
Well, it's like the first one and everything. It was about George.
Yeah.
George, it was the pivotal character who made the big change. And the second one, it's them trying to chase after Biff.
Yeah.
And all the different versions of Biff and everything. And then the third one, which we'll find out and everything, Marty wasn't still the pivotal character.
Yeah.
It was Doc. So that's where we lead off into next in Back to the Future Part 3. That was released in the summer of 1990.